industrial side's not pretty. But it's something that was determined at a time when Prop 2.5 had passed. We sort of got anchored into this position. We've been saved a few times by a school building project. We had rapid growth. So when the younger kids came in, but they weren't in the buildings yet, they were paying taxes.
Chapter
but,
70
But there was no real cost. Ed reform came in 1993. Mm-hmm. One year we got $1 million of extra Chapter 70 money that popped in 1997 or 98 time period. So there's always been some event that has bailed us out, that masked the reality
and the stimulus
of
money
the system doesn't work. And the stimulus money bailed us out again. But now here we are in something that's a very, very different, just a different situation. So I would be supportive of looking at something where we can somehow centralize maintenance and carve it out of the schools, and obviously there's a lot of politics involved in that too.
Right.
I'd like to see the fact that we have probably the most square footage, so it would be nice that we probably get at least some time out of this in terms of maintenance needs, and that's always been my reluctance, is whether or not the schools would be better served, but with the way we are right now, I find it hard pressed to be worse served.
Well, I think that, just looking at our custodians, we've been talking about investigating, outsourcing, because that's also an option.
That was something that we did look at.
But given the few custodians we're left with, actually, it would cost more to outsource because they bring a bigger crew. So, the things that we tried this year to try to generate, additional revenue for the schools, and again, GEF, PTA, all these groups are working tirelessly to try to come up with some things. But we need money in our core.
Right.
We need money in our base.
We can't survive on donations from people and groups.
Which we're so grateful
for,
but we need money in our base.
But we have to pay for other things as well.
But so do the other town departments. So that's why I say it's really a town discussion, right?
Absolutely,
and I know that these community forums that the selectmen have been organized, there's another one on March 5th.
I'll get you in a second.
I think the whole purpose of those is to engage the public in discussion about what do we want Georgetown to be? What services are core and critical, and to what level,
And we have some public people who I know one wants to speak. So
okay,
Pam, do you want to just?
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your intensive analysis of all these budget cuts, which are absolutely horrific and terrifying to me, and just not acceptable to me as a parent in the community. And I can't imagine what's going to happen to our high school if we lose accreditation. The next generation deserves a chance at a future, at a reasonable college acceptance, and to be able to look forward the way, we're entitled, to a free and appropriate public education. That's a basic community responsibility. But I was just wondering, when was the last override that we had in this town that was successful?
We had one.
Education override?
2007, we had one for a fire chief for 90-something thousand, and we had one in '89 for somewhere around, I want to say it was around 300,000. That was to replace lost state aid that benefited the schools.
So that was significant for the schools in 1989.
89.
So since 1989, we've essentially been getting our 2.5% increase from the town.
Plus new growth, if there was new growth, which we don't have now. Plus state aid has been a huge contributor.
Okay, but in terms of the town's contribution,
2.5% a year plus. So it's probably been averaging about 3.5% to 4%.
And the cost of education has been rising at much higher rate than that. Just insurance alone.
No. The cost of education, we've stayed pretty consistent. If you look at averages. What's happening on the town side is the fixed cost of which the school health insurance is there. That's gobbling up the bulk of what we call new money. That's eating that up before it even goes to cover increasing costs at all town departments.
Right.
And there's not much to the town's levy limit, right? So they're right at that
level.
We're
at the levy limit.
And they're right
so
there.
it's not like some towns will have a little bit of wiggle room there.
Not us.
But that's not. It's
We're
kind of like
wiggle room.
We're out of wiggle room.
We're at a skeleton budget as it is.
Right.
So
at all town departments, your town services, town hall's closed on Friday. There's a lot of services and programs that have suffered, in the town over time, and I understand that nobody wants to see their taxes go up, and that it's painful. We all feel it. So I don't know what the answer is, but
there's going to be cuts across the board.
Georgetown is in serious jeopardy.
The what?
Then overall quality of life in Georgetown. We're talking about the education system now, but the entire town.
Absolutely.
Is
response times for emergency could be impacted. It's dangerous.
There's another thing I just want to bring out about special education. Thanks, Pam.
Sure.
About special education too is the fact that when you cut a budget this tight, you know, my phone can ring tomorrow, and the day after this budget's approved, my phone can ring tomorrow, and we could have someone move into the district that has a severely disabled child. My second week here,
Yeah.
we got a phone call from someone who moved in, and that was a first grader, and she's severely disabled, and rightfully so. She cost us $130,000 a year, but that was not in the budget.
Right.
And that could happen tomorrow. That could be the day after we did. In other words, there is no contingencies in this budget for someone that moves into this district that needs some real serious special ed
History has
services.
shown that's happened to us almost every year.
Yes,
Well, we're
yeah.
a magnet at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we're legally obligated. We don't
Exactly.
have a choice. There's
And when you have a child that comes in that's that severe, there isn't a public school system in the state of Massachusetts that could service her. And you know, she's a wonderful little girl, and she requires a nurse with her 24/7. We provide a nurse on the bus to transfer with her. Her transportation costs us $30,000 a year. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that we could get another phone call on the second day of school next year, and if you're looking at cuts, now you're looking at trying to figure out how to cut 3 more teachers to pay for that student.
Right.
So
it's not just the budget that doesn't have that reserve
Right.
anymore.
No,
It's
True, exactly.
used
No,
up
when we had that happen,
all of your
All of our
revolving
revolving
funds.
accounts.
when that's happened to us before, I mean, we've absorbed it.
Right, right.
And-
But when it happened to us, I think it was 01, we actually went back to, it was $192,000, that number's burned into my brain.
Yep.
And we had to go for free cash to balance the budget for that year during
Exactly.
the fall town meeting.
Yeah.
And
Because we had no options.
Right.
But again, because this is a townwide issue, free cash, as we know from
Oh, that's
all the
right.
snow issues,
Might not be
that
there.
may not be there either.
Right.
Right.
And we have to, we know that this happens. We've seen it happen year in and year
It's
out, so
happened.
we're
It
not
happens
trying
every
to.
year.
Every year.
We're not trying to say to people, this could
And-
happen.
and
It does
And
happen.
every department has those kind of things that could happen to them.
There's
to the
variables.
police
That has always been a
department.
big variable, and then
But-
maintenance is a big variable,
Yeah.
that we don't have any wiggle room in here, as you said, to cover
Of
those
course.
unforeseen
Yeah,
expenses.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I've been actually pretty quiet tonight.
You've been awesome.
And we have pushed a
Not
few of your
feisty,
buttons
not
too.
feisty. Well, the only point I want to make is just to follow up on this comments you guys have already made. But we went through this process, was it last year or the year before, when we tried to buy 2 vans to like cut down on transportation costs,
It was last year.
and we just got shot down. Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not, to me, it's not even the amount of money. We've always thought, well, if you make it small override, or the town
Right.
will, you know, come support the
If it's
schools.
capital equipment,
It
they're
was
more
like
likely.
$25,000,
Yeah.
and it got shut down. And so, I just think if we go down that path, it just has to be communicated properly.
Right.
And I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's around maintenance or whatever.
Yeah, I
But
don't know.
we tried transportation, we tried, you know, we've had different conversations, and the one override that lost by, what, 10 votes or something,
17.
17 votes, you know, was a pretty big number. And everyone,
That was a
remember at
big
the time,
number.
everyone said, wow,
I
it
think
was
that
a
was,
small
I think that
number.
was about 700,000
Right.
for the
It's
schools.
not the number, it's
We
not
got
the number.
767 on that.
There you go.
It's
I
not
just
the
think
number.
it's gotta be,
Very good, George.
it's gotta
Well-
be packaged correct, is all I'm saying, if
Yeah.
you go down that path.
And speaking of, Mr. Smith?
Mr. Smith?
So, this is a tough list, but the one nice thing is it's very understandable. I really commend that. The amount of work that goes on something like this is phenomenal. It takes a lot of effort. So, you know, the first choice is we just make these cuts. And I don't see anyone in the room jumping up for that. And I think you'd have a lot of support out of the community, not just to make these cuts. But if we don't do that, the option was brought up as an override, which is always tough. But I think the third option I'd like to see this board do is that everyone's been asked to do level funding, right? Which is very fiscally responsible. It's the right thing to ask for. It's the right thing to do. Times are tough, but I think this board should push back and say level funding is not going to work. And we don't have 872,000. I'll be right out there right now.
No.
But in every budget I've ever seen in my life, there's always ways to make some movement. And maybe it's halfway there. Maybe, you know, that number really is playing. But what I would encourage this board is, short of an override, which we all know has a life of its own, is to go back and say, we did as we asked. And again, I am not knocking, you know, the FinCom team and others for requesting that, because that, you know, that was the right request to make. So we did what you asked. It's not acceptable. So we need to push back as a board and say we need to work with you, FinCom and Selectmen and team, and say we need a middle ground here. Because I think if you could find a middle ground, still some tough cuts, but if there could be found a middle ground within the existing budget, and we pushed for a centralized maintenance, which I think has more universal town appeal and is desperately needed, we could salvage a lot of this, hopefully. It's a tough decision, but again, I think this board needs to push back on that, and maybe take care of or take a giant step towards our maintenance issues. So I would encourage option 2, because the other 2 options are the extreme options, and see if we can get to, these are tough times, it's not going to be a good decision, but can we get to an acceptable, workable decision? And, we're all going to have to get a little uncomfortable and see where that money would come from.
It's an option, but, I mean, we know where the support is. We've been told.
It was made painfully clear where the support is and the lack of support for, override at this point.
I'm not talking override, though.
No, right,
right,
yeah.
No,
we're talking about finding the middle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pushback, and one committee has
Well,
made a
there
statement, this committee
there
has
is
to make a
state law
counter
on,
statement that says it doesn't work.
if you really want to go that way.
Yeah, I mean,
State law does not, state law basically says the FinCom does not dictate the school budget.
And again, what I'm,
yeah.
But we have to play nice. We all have to play together.
If we get into the do's and don'ts, I mean, everybody is working hard to make Georgetown work,
Right.
There isn't one person in any of these committees, and there are obviously different interests and different focuses of the groups. But I think this is a pretty good case, fact-based case, to go back and say, this doesn't work.
Right, but we still have to be prepared for, too bad, that's your number. And then we also have to be prepared for the override that then would come. And if, should that fail, we still have to live with this.
You're prepared for that right now. You're all done.
Yeah, we are. We're prepared.
We are.
You're prepared.
We are.
We are,
Well,
but
we are, but we're not.
We're not mentally
emotionally
on
we're
paper.
there.
We're not close to mentally ready
No.
for this.
Emotionally, mentally, you're not there yet, but
no, we still have issues.
strategically you're there. Now you have to push back.
What we need is the 8% increase to keep what we're doing now. We're not gonna get that. So you're saying, is there something in the middle? Is there, how far down do you go till you don't, it's not as painful, but you can move in the direction that helps the town? That's what you get to a number that everybody can live
Right.
with.
So
Yeah.
every year, I mean.
No, but he's not talking override.
No, I know,
No, but every year I'm not, there is a
He's
point
talking about
where-
figuring out some other way to fund the other.
I mean, I don't know
It's
the
cutting other
exact numbers, but
departments.
free cash
That's it.
drops
I
to
don't have it either.
200,000,
Well,
at the end of the year it ends up at
I know that.
850,000,
Meals
right?
tax.
That kind of tends to, and that's tends to be normal.
Yeah.
The 2.5% was taken this year, so that there is 2.5% increase in the overall budget. How is that allocated? It's probably a safety net right now. So it might be a little uncomfortable to push to a different level on the free cash, for example. But I think you have to have that hard conversation. You need to have it 3 times. It's not one conversation, you can't give up on it. You gotta keep pushing. And, everyone's gonna work hard to try and figure this out. It's not gonna be nothing against them, but it's gonna be a hard conversation. So right now, we need the school committee to go and push and say, we're back, we're not up against the wall, we're through the wall. And we gotta come back again.
What's happening with the meals tax?
We have like 2 restaurants that sold a burger.
I know.
So-
I know, but it was brought up by the,
I would say at this point,
You're not gonna be able to eat in this town.
That's what you're gonna get.
Spit
I would say
burger.
nothing officially is there.
We're not a restaurant place, right?
But I would also say, if that's $50,000 to $75,000, it's a nice little thing. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't actually move the needle.
No, I understand
and
that.
You got
But I know
to
that
take on the
people
bigger
like
fight,
people
and
say-
We can
then
get 50 to 75,000 off a meal tax.
I've heard that number. I don't know if that's the case. Don't quote me on that.
I read that, but I thought
I'm
it was
reaching back
covered.
on that.
That's a
but-
teacher.
But the point is, you need to push back on your own merits. There's always grants and other little things that happen that we try and push for that could be a piece, but I actually have a personal opinion that we should use that money for a different purpose. But I'm just encouraging this board to, it's not a fight, but to stand up and say this is not going to work. And we understand where everybody's coming from, but let's go talk about it 6 more times if we have to.
There is another issue
Okay.
that comes into this debate when you potentially do the pushback, and I'm actually kind of endorsing what Selectman Smith is saying, if I may, is that if you do this, if you cut to a level budget, You just committed the town to a $342,000 increase in their unemployment costs.
Right.